The call came at 2:47 a.m. Not to check on me. To complain. "Ethan, this is ridiculous." My mother's voice, sharp even through the morphine haze. "Your father has a conference in the morning. We can't just drop everything because you have the flu." I stared at the hospital ceiling, 4-line trailing from my left arm, the steady beep of monitors marking time I didn't know I'd nearly run out of. "Mom, it's not the flu. I had emergency surgery. They said if I'd waited another hour." "Well, you didn't wait, so you're fine." The dismissal was surgical, practiced. "We'll visit when things settle down. Feel better." The line went dead before I could say sepsis. Before I could say I coded on the table. Before I could say I'm scared. I set the phone down gently, the same way you'd set down something broken you're not sure you want to fix. Then I pressed the call button, and when the night nurse appeared, I asked for one thing that wasn't morphine. "Can I see a patient advocate? I need to update my estate documents." What happened in the 72 hours that followed didn't just remove my parents from an inheritance. It removed me from a family that had always treated love like a performance review, conditional, quarterly, subject to revision based on convenience. Before I tell you how a hospital room became a courtroom and $8 million became the cost of clarity, hit like, and tell me, have you ever had a medical emergency where the people who should have cared most couldn't be bothered to show up? Because that night, I learned that the people who say family is everything are usually the ones treating you like you're optional. They say you find out who really loves you in a crisis. But sometimes the crisis isn't the emergency. It's realizing there never was love there to begin with. My name is Ethan Cordell, I'm 29, and until 3 days ago, I was the designated successor to a family legacy I'd spent my entire life earning my way into. I live in Boston, work as a research scientist at a biotech firm, and come from old money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, that measures worth in trust fund distributions, and whose name appears on which hospital wing. My parents, Robert and Catherine Cordell, built their lives on appearances. Charity galas where they donated just enough for recognition. Sunday brunches at the club where everything looked perfect from the outside. My older sister Miranda learned early how to play that game, married well, produced photogenic grandchildren, lived 3 streets over in a house our parents helped buy. I learned to play differently. I became useful, excelled academically, got my PhD by 26, published research that got cited in medical journals, made the family name mean something beyond old money and older connections. My grandmother, Eleanor Cordell, passed 2 years ago. She left me her entire estate, $8 million in trust, her brownstone in Beacon Hill, her collection of first edition books, everything that mattered. The terms were clear, the full amount transferred to me at 30, or earlier if I married or had a medical emergency requiring family support. That last clause felt like insurance at the time. Now it felt like prophecy. She'd included one other provision. I could remove beneficiaries at any time, for any reason, with a single notarized document. People show you who they are in crisis. She told me a month before she died, her hand paper thin in mine. When they do, believe them, and protect yourself accordingly. I thought I understood. I didn't. Not until I was lying in a hospital bed at 2 a.m., learning that a ruptured appendix that had gone septic wasn't enough to justify my parents driving 30 minutes across the city. The first day was the worst. Not physically, the surgery had gone well, all things considered, but emotionally it was an excavation. Every hour I lay there alone. Another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. I was 12, broke my arm during soccer practice, Dad had a networking dinner, Mom had book club. Miranda picked me up from the ER 3 hours later, annoyed she'd had to leave her study group. I was 19, had pneumonia my freshman year of college. "You're at Harvard," Mom had said over the phone. "They have excellent student health services. You'll be fine." I was 24. Car accident on the Mass Pike. Whiplash, concussion, totaled vehicle. "Well, you're calling us, so obviously you're not dying," Dad had said. "Insurance will handle the car. We'll check in later." They never did. But when Miranda's daughter had croup last year, they'd driven to her house at midnight, stayed for 3 days, hired a private nurse. When Dad had his gallbladder out, Mom had turned their guest room into a recovery suite, took 2 weeks off her committee work. I'd always told myself it was because I was capable, independent, the strong one who didn't need coddling. Lying there, monitors beeping, incision burning every time I breathed, I finally understood. I wasn't strong, I was convenient. Loving me didn't require anything of them, so they didn't give anything. The patient advocate arrived at noon. Jane, mid-50s, kind eyes, carrying a tablet, and the kind of competence that feels like oxygen. You wanted to discuss your advance directives, she asked gently, and my inheritance beneficiaries. I shifted, wincing. My grandmother's trust has a medical emergency clause. I need to invoke it and make changes. She nodded, no judgment. I'll need your attorney's contact information. We can facilitate the call from here. My attorney, David Chen, had handled Grandma Eleanor's estate. He knew the family dynamics better than most therapists. Ethan, his voice came through the phone, tinny but clear. I heard about the surgery. How are you holding up? Physically? Recovering. Emotionally? I looked at the empty chair beside my bed, the untouched visitor's pass on the side table. I'm done, David. Done. I want to invoke the medical emergency clause. Transfer the full trust to my control immediately. I took a breath, felt the incision pull, and I want to remove my parents as beneficiaries. Completely. Silence. Not shocked silence. Considering silence. Miranda? He asked finally. She called once, texted that she'd try to visit this weekend if the kids' schedule allowed. I laughed bitter. She lives 20 minutes away, so no, not Miranda. Who do you want as beneficiaries? I'd been thinking about this for hours. 50% to the Eleanor Cordell Research Grant. I'll establish it for women in STEM. 25% to Dr. Sarah Vance, my colleague, who'd sat with me in the ER for 4 hours before my emergency contact could even be reached. 25% to Jane Morrison, the patient advocate who'd treated me with more maternal concern in 2 hours than my mother had in 29 years. Your parents will contest this, David said quietly. Let them. Grandma's trust is ironclad. She was explicit. My judgment on who deserves to benefit from her legacy is final. They'll argue undue influence, that you're on pain medication. Then get here with a notary and a cognitive assessment specialist. I'll pass any test they want to give me. My voice steadied. I'm not doing this out of spite, David. I'm doing it out of clarity. They've shown me for 29 years that I'm optional. I'm finally believing them. The documents arrived by 6 p.m. The notary, the witness, the cognitive specialist who asked me questions about current events, math problems, legal understanding. I passed everything. At 6:47 p.m., I signed my name. The $8 million trust transferred to my sole control. My parents' names disappeared from every beneficiary line. David gathered the papers, his expression unreadable. They'll find out when the annual trust statement goes out next month. Good. I settled back against the pillows. That gives me time to recover before the fallout. And if they show up then? Demanding to know why, I smiled, the morphine making everything slightly softer except my resolve. Then I'll tell them the truth. They taught me that love is conditional. I'm just applying their lesson. The call came 32 days later. I'd been home for 3 weeks, back at work for 1, and almost convinced myself the whole thing would pass quietly. What did you do? My mother's voice, pure fury, no preamble. I set down my coffee, walked to my living room window overlooking the Charles River. Hi Mom, I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Recovery's been smooth. Don't you dare. Her voice shook. We just received the trust distribution statement. Our names are gone. Gone. You removed us? I did. Over what? A tantrum because we didn't rush to the hospital. No. I kept my voice level. Over a lifetime pattern of showing me exactly where I rank in your priorities. The hospital was just the moment I finally paid attention. You had surgery. You were fine. I had sepsis, Mom. I coded on the table. They had to restart my heart. Each word came out clean, factual. And when I called you at 2 a.m., scared and alone, you told me I was being ridiculous. Silence. Then, we were going to visit. When? You live 30 minutes away. I was there for 4 days. You never came. Your father was busy. Dad drove to Miranda's house at midnight last year when Lily had croup. The comparison hung there, sharp and undeniable. It's not about busy, Mom. It's about priorities. I'm not one. So you're stealing your inheritance? Her voice climbed. Money your grandmother intended for the whole family. Money she left to me. I cut her off. With explicit instructions that I could distribute it as I saw fit. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was manipulated in her final years. She was sharper at 90 than you are at 63. I smiled despite myself. And she told me, explicitly, to pay attention to who showed up when things got hard. You didn't show up, Mom. Neither did Dad. That's not manipulation. That's just data. They appeared at my office 2 days later. Unannounced, uninvited. Dad in his Brooks Brothers suit, and Mom in pearls, both of them vibrating with the kind of outrage that comes from consequences finally arriving. My assistant Priya buzzed me. Your parents are here. I told them you're in a meeting. It's fine. Send them in. They entered like dignitaries expecting apologies. Found me behind my desk, healthy, calm, completely unmoved. Ethan. Dad's voice carried the authority that had worked on me for 29 years. This has gone far enough. You're going to reinstate us as beneficiaries, and we're going to forget this ever happened. No. The word landed like a door closing. Excuse me? Mom stepped forward. You don't get to unilaterally decide. Actually, I do. Grandma's trust explicitly gives me sole discretion. I pulled out the relevant document, slid it across the desk. Page 7, Clause 14. The primary beneficiary shall have absolute authority to designate secondary beneficiaries and modify such designations at any time, for any reason, without requirement of justification or family consensus. Dad scanned it, his face reddening. This is elder abuse. She wasn't in her right mind. She passed 3 cognitive assessments in her final year specifically to prevent that argument. I leaned back. David has all the documentation, so do her doctors. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she trusted me to make the right call. The right call? Mom's voice cracked. We're your parents. You are. I met her eyes. And in 29 years, you've made it crystal clear that my value to you is conditional. When I'm successful, you claim me. When I'm convenient, you include me. But when I needed you, I shook my head. You told me I was being ridiculous and hung up. We apologized for that. No, you didn't. The realization seemed to hit her. You've called me 11 times since you got that statement. Not once did you ask how I'm feeling. Not once did you acknowledge that I almost died. Every single call has been about the money. The silence that followed was vast. You want to know what's in the trust now? I continued. 50% establishes the Eleanor Cordell Grant for Women in STEM. She'd have loved that. 25% goes to Dr. Sarah Vance, who sat with me in the ER when I was terrified and alone. 25% goes to Jane Morrison, a patient advocate who treated me with more motherly concern in 2 hours than you've shown in 2 years. You're giving our inheritance to strangers. Dad's voice shook. It was never your inheritance. It was Grandma's. Then it became mine, and I'm honoring her by giving it to people who showed up. I stood up, the conversation clearly over. You taught me that love is transactional, conditional, something you earn through performance and convenience. I'm just applying your framework. And by your own metrics, you don't qualify. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, maybe. Ethan, please. I almost died, Mom. I said it gently. And you couldn't be bothered to drive across town. That told me everything I needed to know. They left. No apologies, no real acknowledgement. Just wounded pride dressed up as parental concern. The Eleanor Cordell Grant awarded its first 3 scholarships in November. Full rides for undergraduate women pursuing degrees in biochemistry, neuroscience, and genetic research. The award ceremony was small, meaningful, everything Grandma would have wanted. Dr. Vance cried when I told her about her portion. Ethan, I just sat with you. That's what friends do. Exactly, I'd said. That's what people who care do. And you did it when it mattered. Jane, the patient advocate, used her portion to establish a fund for uninsured patients needing emergency care. Your grandmother must have been an incredible woman, she said. She was. She taught me that love isn't what people say, it's what they do when it costs them something. My parents didn't attend the grant ceremony. Miranda sent a card, polite and distant. We haven't spoken since. My father sent one email, 3 months after they appeared at my office. Your mother and I have reflected on your concerns. While we don't agree with your characterization of our relationship, we respect your right to manage your inheritance as you see fit. We hope in time you'll reconsider your position. No apology. No acknowledgement of the actual issue. Just corporate language and conditional hope. I didn't respond. Some silences are their own answer. I still work at the biotech firm. Still live in Grandma's brownstone, surrounded by her books and her wisdom. The research grant sends me updates quarterly, photos of the scholars, their projects, their dreams made possible. People ask if I regret it, cutting off my family over one hospital visit. But it wasn't one visit. It was 29 years of moments just like it, strung together like evidence I'd been collecting without realizing. The hospital was just the first time I stopped making excuses for them. Grandma Eleanor used to say, proximity isn't intimacy, Ethan. Being related isn't the same as being connected. I understand now. My parents were always proximate. We shared holidays, obligations, a last name. But connected? That requires showing up when showing up is inconvenient. It requires caring when caring costs you something. They never did that for me, so I stopped doing it for them. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below. Where are you listening from? And have you ever had to set boundaries with family after a medical crisis showed you their true priorities? This is Calm Verdict Stories. I'm Ethan, and this is what happens when you stop waiting for people to care and start protecting yourself with the same energy you used to protect them. To everyone recovering from more than just surgery, healing looks like boundaries. And sometimes the best inheritance isn't money, it's the clarity to walk away.